welcome to Washington and the Library of Congress for this year's Coolidge Foundation Conference, the Declaration, Continuity, and Commerce. I'm Matt Denhart, president of the Coolidge Foundation, and it's a real pleasure and honor for me on behalf of our chairman, Amity Schlaze, and members of our board who are here with us to welcome all of you. I'd like to welcome our C-SPAN audience. This is being taped, and we are awfully glad that C-SPAN will help us share the proceedings of this conference far and wide. And so we welcome our C-SPAN audience. I would also like to thank our hosts, especially the Library of Congress and Dr. Carla Hayden, of course, the Librarian of Congress, for hosting us. And in a moment, we'll hear from Dr. Sherry Hsu, historian in the Manuscript Division. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for making today's conference possible, chief among them, the Lined and Harry Bradley Foundation. Thank you to Ambassador Rick Graber and his team who are here, and we'll hear from Rick, who will moderate a session later. Many other sponsors who have made this possible, including Michael and Olga Block, Mike and Lindy Kaiser, Dave and Connie Coolidge, and many others. They're listed in your program. I'd like to thank a number of groups who have brought students and also helped sponsor Constituting America, and the Vertex Partnership Academies, led by Ian Rowe, have students here as well. And something remarkable about Coolidge conferences is the student presence of students from our own programs, and so I'd like to extend a warm welcome to alumni of the Coolidge Scholars, Coolidge Senators, our Nunn Fellows, and debaters from our 1890 Society. We look forward to seeing all of you today. Well, as I mentioned, the title of today's conference is the Declaration, Continuity, and Commerce. And this year, of course, begins an important anniversary that will span 2 years, America's 250th anniversary. You may think that we're jumping the gun, no pun intended, but actually the first shots did ring out at Lexington and Concord, as our students will know, in 1775. So really this year does begin America's 250th anniversary. We also thought it was key that before the big celebration in 2026, that we all revisit the principles that were present in the Declaration and have time to consider them and remember what a remarkable anniversary we are indeed celebrating. The emphasis in the coming years, no doubt, will be on rebellion. That's what we learn about in school. That's the exciting part, perhaps in pop culture. The musical Hamilton, which is a favorite of so many of ours, especially conveys well the rebellion and the excitement there. You hear about the chance to become a hero. The history has its eyes on you. The lyrics go on about the chance to reorder the world turned upside down. Yet, for many, the point of the American Revolution and the Declaration was not to actually turn the world upside down. That is, the rebellion was not the main point. The main point was to continue the good traditions that were already present in intellectual thought and in practice in some areas. The better parts of what the English had established and those from Scotland and Holland and elsewhere. These were the truths that the founders found to be self-evident. The inalienable rights of individuals, equality before the law, and self-government through consent of the governed. The colonists thought that George III wasn't exercising these well, and we could do it better. But the point was not a rebellion for rebellion's sake, but a rebellion, a revolution to establish a government that would cement these principles so they might be realized. President Calvin Coolidge, 150 years later, recognized this. In fact, even before that, when he was just a student, like many of our students here today, he was at Amherst College, and he won his first big national win. It was not an election, but was an essay contest. And at the Coolidge Foundation, we sponsor many essay contests, and I like to think Calvin won the first one. But this was a national prize for essays on the founding of America. And Coolidge titled his essay, "The Principles Fought For in the American Revolution." And he underscored this theme of continuity. He said that the Declaration, quote, was not so much a revolution, not a propagation of new ideas, as the maintenance of the old forms of representative government, of chartered rights and constitutional liberty. Coolidge went on, England had fought for this in 1688 and imagined it was secure, but it was so only in name. The American Revolution and the Declaration, of course, would make it so in fact. And continuity is the first theme that we'll study here today. Our other theme, often forgotten, is commerce and the important role of free markets in our founding and indeed today. School students, of course, learn about the colonists' repulsion at the Crown's many taxes, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, many others, perhaps most exciting, the Boston Tea Party. And the Crown's impingement on commerce, of course, did infuriate the colonies and drove them to consider a breakaway. But the American Revolution was not just a tax rebellion. It was even deeper than that. George Washington and the other founders, let's not forget, were not just generals and statesmen, but entrepreneurs and businessmen. They recognized that free markets were fundamental to free individuals and to the free society that they envisioned for America. For a people to be truly free, of course, they must be able to determine their own future and be secure in their property. So we look forward to examining this theme as well. This is our third annual conference. 2 years ago, we gathered to celebrate the centennial of the Coolidge presidency right here in this very room. Last year, not quite a year ago, we came to consider the history of federal debt, which of course is on the country's mind as we begin a new administration and a new Congress. A staple of what makes our conferences different really is our focus on history. Rather than just talking about now, we think it's always important to look at what we've been through, how we've addressed challenges, and what we might learn for our present moment. On the one hand, we have truly distinguished experts, and we look forward to you hearing from them today. On the other, we have more than 100 students present who will be introducing sessions, asking questions, and taking part in the deliberations. The Coolidge Foundation is committed not merely to honoring Coolidge and his values, but making sure that young people especially have a chance to learn American history. Speaking at the 150th anniversary of the Declaration, Calvin Coolidge encouraged Americans to study the founders so that they could understand their work. He said, "Our forefathers came to certain conclusions and decided upon certain courses of action, which have been a great blessing to the world. Before we can understand their conclusions, we must go back and review the course they followed." So that's just what we'll do today, and we're so glad to have all of you with us in this review of history. 3 distinguished speakers will help place this conference in context and help frame the discussions that will follow. I'll introduce them all right now and then invite them up to the podium one by one. First will be Coolidge Foundation trustee and president of the University of Baltimore, longtime mayor of the city of Baltimore, Kurt Schmoke, who is very glad he's not the mayor when snowstorms hit. He was reminding me this morning, and we're glad he's, after many years of service, that he can spend some time at conferences like this one. Next will be Dr. Sherry Hsu, who's a historian in the Manuscript Division here at the Library of Congress, our host. Dr. Hsu oversees more than 800 collections, including, importantly among those, the papers of Calvin Coolidge. And finally, we'll hear from Coolidge Foundation trustee and longtime governor, former governor of Vermont, Jim Douglas. Jim Douglas is now an executive in residence at Middlebury College and has honored us for many years on our board and leading our scholarship jury. So with that, I would now like to encourage you to give a Coolidge welcome to Mayor Kurt Schmoke.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. They are here. Well, first of all, let me give you a hearty welcome from the Coolidge Foundation. We are a foundation dedicated to President Calvin Coolidge and his principles. Those include civility, equality, and restrained government. In this crowd are more than 100 students from our programs, and we're so proud of each and every one of you. Coolidge so loved the founding documents that he wrote about them often and eloquently. A particularly memorable speech that he wrote was a graduation address he gave in 1924 at Howard University, one of the nation's leading historically black colleges and universities. That address embodied principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence, such as equality of all people, the defense of freedom, and the crucial role of commerce in improving the quality of life for the citizens of this great nation. We are grateful, as Matt mentioned, we are grateful to Dr. Carla Hayden, the Distinguished Librarian of Congress, for hosting us in this historic place. Next year marks the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence, which you all have a copy of in your programs. Arguably, the first step to benefiting from the founders and the founding documents is to get to know those men in those documents, which is why we have convened this conference. Education's hard work and demands a lifelong commitment to it. I'm reminded of that daily because the students at my university are primarily what some would classify as non-traditional. Average age of our undergraduates at the University of Baltimore is 28 years old. Those students will join me in celebrating our anniversary in this year, 2025. This is the centennial of the University of Baltimore. Well, you might notice that the conference, as Matt alluded to, is titled The Declaration, Continuity, and Commerce. Other conferences cast the revolution as all rebellion. This conference will be looking into what in the Declaration was continuity, that is, building on ideas and concepts from philosophers from England, Ireland, Holland, and others. We'll be comparing the difference between our Declaration of 1776 and that of France, which of course came just after in 1789. We'll also study the importance of commerce and trade in our founding. And on that point, we will not ignore the facts that the slave trade had a significant impact on commerce and that nearly a third of the signers of the Declaration were slave owners. What is important is to acknowledge that these were 18th century leaders, not 21st century officials. Our recognition of these historical facts serves to remind us of the challenges the country faced and overcame, and how efforts were made and continue to be made to achieve a more perfect union. So finally, we'll be treating how and whether we have lived up to our Declaration 250 years on. So today, we'll do a lot of learning. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kurt. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Sherry Hsu.
Good morning and welcome to your Library of Congress. How many of you are in DC for the first time? Oh, wow, lots of returning people. How many of you are here at the Library of Congress for the first time? All right, so more hands. And so if it's your first visit to the Library of Congress, welcome. If you're a multiple-time visitor to the Library of Congress, welcome back. My name is Sherry Hsu, and I am a historian here at the library. As America's oldest cultural institution and the world's largest library, the library is more than just books, although we certainly have plenty of those. Here, we think about the preservation of knowledge in the broadest sense. We're the custodians of roughly 164 million individual items in over 470 languages. The oldest item in our collections is a cuneiform tablet from 2040 BC. Here, you can see a perfect and complete Gutenberg Bible, or the world's largest collection of comic books. Since 1931, the library has also provided books in Braille and on recorded sound to visually impaired readers. Many of your favorite movies are preserved here for posterity through the National Film Registry, including films such as Iron Man, When Harry Met Sally, Die Hard, WALL-E, Shrek, and even The Wrath of Khan. We have entire reading rooms devoted to newspapers, photographs, and graphic prints, music and performing arts, maps, movies, sound recordings, rare books and special collections, folk life, and veteran stories. You can access most of our collections with a simple reader registration and a reader's card. As the great philosopher Arthur once told us, having fun isn't hard, and if you know the rest of it, you can say it with me, when you've got a library card. In my part of the library, the manuscript division, we collect and preserve unpublished primary sources. Included among more than our 12,000 collections in the manuscript divisions are the papers of iconic American figures from all walks of life. Jackie Robinson, Alexander Hamilton, the Wright brothers, Rosa Parks, Sandra Day O'Connor, Charles and Ray Eames, Robert Oppenheimer, and I.M. Pei, just to name a few. One of the prized gems in our collections are the papers of 23 U.S. presidents, from George Washington to Calvin Coolidge. Our presidential collections are digitized and available online, so please take a look at them at your leisure or the next time you have a term paper due. Through sources as varied as letters and diaries to architectural blueprints and Outlook emails, historians and other researchers use the resources of the Library of Congress to better understand the tribulations, successes, and complexities of American life. We collect not just for the present, but for generations yet to come. Ours is a repository of knowledge, creativity, and good old-fashioned grit. I've already doubled the words spoken by Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address. If you're wondering, we have 2 copies of the originals. So we'll simply end with this. As the custodians of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Collection and so many of our other national treasures, we're delighted to have you all here at the Library of Congress for today's events. Welcome.
And now, Governor Jim Douglas.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you all for joining us on a Vermont-like weather day here in the nation's capital. We're delighted that you could spend it with us, and I know it's going to be not only entertaining, but also informative, and a great start to our commemoration of the Declaration of Independence that will culminate next year. Coolidge, in his autobiography, remarked that July 4th has a particular meaning for him because it is, of course, his birthday. And I would be remiss if I didn't put in a plug for the activities we sponsor at his birthplace and final resting place in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, on and around the 4th of July. There's information on the Coolidge Foundation website, and some of you have been there, many of you in fact have, and we hope others will this year or in the years to come. We'd love to see you there. Well, we're in the Montpelier Room. Okay, maybe it wasn't named for the capital of our state, but rather for a homestead of the nation's 4th president. But it gives me the opportunity to remind you that the declaration about which we're speaking was not the only declaration of independence in this area in those days. Vermont declared its independence in January of 1777. We declared our independence not only from the British Empire, but also from New Hampshire and New York, both of which claimed the territory that is now known as Vermont. 6 months after that, in July of 77, we adopted our state constitution, and it was the first on the continent to prohibit slavery and to extend universal male suffrage. So we're very proud of our leadership and delighted that the rest of the country came along a little later on. We didn't know what the future of the Green Mountain State might be back then. We were an independent nation for 14 years. We had our own coins and currency. Finally, of course, we were admitted to the Union in 1791, or as one local scholar puts it, put our neck in the yoke of Union, and it's been mighty callous ever since. Well, you can be the judge of that. but obviously we're focused on the other Declaration of Independence, the one that was proclaimed in July of 1776, and has been noted by my colleagues. President Coolidge urged us to study it, to learn from it, along with our other founding documents, and to ensure that we continue to enshrine its principles in our daily lives for generations to come. Matt mentioned the award-winning essay that Coolidge wrote. He was a senior at Amherst College then in 1895. I won't give you the entire address, but here's a brief excerpt from it. He was talking about the history of democracy, such as it was or became in the British Empire, and he said, "Although it is characteristic of Englishmen to have great love for a king, so long as he respects the liberties of the people, yet the fact that they drove out one king, rebelled against two, and executed three shows clearly enough that there was always a strong idea of the divine right of the people as well as of kings." And of course, he was right. He continues to be right. And that's why we're all here today to continue to learn about that great document. He gave a speech on July 5th, 1926, entitled "The Inspiration of the Declaration." Many of our scholars and students know it well. He gave it on the 5th of July because the 4th was a Sunday, and he didn't think it was appropriate to deliver an address he wanted to honor the separation of church and state. But I commend it to you. I hope you'll read it. It's in the back of our program. Don't read it during the panels that we're having today, but at your leisure at some other time. I think you'll find it inspiring too. So through a combination of his study of Western civilization and the small town values that were instilled in him by his father and neighbors in the tiny hamlet where he was born and grew up, gave Calvin Coolidge a passionate appreciation for the principles of the Declaration of Independence. It's so appropriate that we gather this year and next to reaffirm our dedication to those principles. We ought to do that at least, every 250 years or so. So on behalf of all my colleagues on the board of the Coolidge Foundation, I want to thank you for being a part of this important conference and look forward to seeing you at more foundation events in the years to come. Thank you very much.